Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colin Childs, and I'm an instructor with the Education Delivery Team here in Redlands, California. Joining me today is Bruce Harold, who is a product manager with the ArcGIS desktop team here in Redlands. We want to welcome you all to today's live training seminar entitled, What's New in ArcGIS Desktop 9.3? The seminar is going to cover three separate topics: ArcGIS 9.3's new and improved, ArcMap productivity enhancements, and web data in your maps. Each of the topics will be followed by a short demonstration, a review of what we covered, and some questions and answers that Bruce will deal with. To begin with, let's take a look at our very first topic, ArcGIS 9.3 New and Improved. And the idea with this topic was to give you an overview of some of the goals of the ArcGIS 9.3 release, and also to discuss very briefly some of the more overbearing and larger things. So the goals of the ArcGIS 9.3 release were really to do some improvements in the quality of the product, to add some new functionality, but also to make you more productive with the product. We also did a number of enhancements to documentation, to performance, and introduced some new functionality to do crash reporting. I do want to stress that the 9.3 release is very much driven by the feedback that you have given our development team and our support team over the years, and that these are things that you've asked for and requested that have been added into the software. Now let's move along and look at some general information about ArcGIS 9.3. It is supported on Windows Vista. It is certified for Intel and AMD 64-bit processor families, and a new license manager has been introduced with 9.3, FlexNet Publisher 11.4, which does give better remote desktop support when using the license manager. Now let's take a look at some of those documentation changes that I spoke about briefly. And the documentation team have been very hard at work in adding some new things to the help doc. They've introduced some new search options for you. They've improved the indexing of the help doc. They've also introduced many new topics in the glossary. And for those of you that have requested, they've increased the size of the display window. So when you open up and launch the help documentation the first time, it opens up a little bigger than it did in the past, a little clearer for you to be able to read and to migrate through. Now, one of the things I like about Help Doc in 9.3 is that they've also introduced something called an expandable. Very often when you go to a topic in the Help Doc, there's too much information that overwhelms you when you look at the first page. With the expandables, you'll notice a plus and a minus button in the text, and by clicking on the plus button, you can open up or expand that topic or concept. When you're finished reading that, you can click on the plus button again, and it'll reduce or make that concept or topic smaller, and you can then continue with the rest of the reading that you might want to do in the help. The folks at documentation have also added some new functionality for topic navigation, and they've added in something we call section highlighting. So you're able to, within a section, get a highlight of a particular concept or word that you had searched for. Moving on a little further, they've also done some work on the graphics, and some new graphic styles have been introduced as well. Looking at the graphic you see on this slide now, you'll notice that we're showing you some of the help doc with respect to the clip tool. Now, the clip tool in geoprocessing can be run either individually or it could be run in batch mode. So within the help doc, we're showing you the parameters of the tool as it would be run as a single tool, and then that same parameter as it would be introduced in the clip tool in batch mode. So you'll notice that the graphics are much clearer. They try to improve the clarity of the topic and the concept more for you. And if you go and explore the help documentation, you'll see some of this in more detail. Moving along a little, the geoprocessing team have introduced several new highlights to geoprocessing in ArcGIS 9.3. Two of these are two new toolboxes, a mobile and a schematics toolbox for the schematics extension that allows you to use geoprocessing tools with that type of function, with the schematics and mobile functionality. Also, additional geoprocessing tools have been added for joining with join fields, and geographically weighted regression from the spatial statistics team is a new tool that's been added. One of the more exciting tools that I really like is the apply symbology from layer tool that has been added. And what this is really useful is when I'm creating a model in ArcMap, for example, I'd like the output or the result of my model to be added to the table of content with some symbology applied. Now, in the past, this was not possible, but with the apply symbology from layer option, you can actually say to the software, hey, when the final result is done, use this graduation of color derived from this layer file, for example. So one of those really useful tools. One more thing that the geoprocessing team have worked on quite hard is the facility to add tool errors and warnings in. Now, from time to time, geoprocessing tools may fail. Often the reason for failing is unclear. It might be a user error, it may be an incorrect syntax in an expression, for example, or you might not have access to the location where the tool is trying to write the result. Now, since it was a little cryptic in the past, the tools and error warnings now give you an actual error code as part of the dialog that returns from the geoprocessing tool. And you'll notice error 210 here. Now keep in mind that this error 210 that you see in the dialog that I'm displaying on the graphic is actually hyperlinked back to the help doc. And if I clicked on that error, it would take me to the tools and error warnings area of the help doc. And if I searched and looked at that help or that particular tool error 210, I'll see that the error was as a result of the output result of the tool not being able to be created. Perhaps the location where I want to write this result was locked, or perhaps that workspace didn't exist at all. So notice how I'm getting both description and solution to the error warning that was given to me a little earlier. Something I like as well that the geoprocessing team have done, and this has been a request from many of you, was the addition of the Start Model Builder button to the Tools toolbar. Now, actually, this is to the standard toolbar. When you click on the Start Model Builder button, it immediately launches the Model Builder window, and you can go ahead and immediately go and create a new model. Now, in the past, in 9.2 and earlier versions, you were required to create a toolbox first, and then within the toolbox to create a new model. This was somewhat cumbersome for people, and so the new Start Model Builder button removes the need for you to create a toolbox if you are wanting to create a quick model without the requirement to save that model later. Of course, if you do decide you want to save it, you need to just point to a toolbox to save it into. The idea with the button for Model Builder is I need to do some real quick process, or I want to just automate a quick procedure, but I don't really want to keep the resultant model after I've run that procedure. And so you'd use the Start Model button. Before I forget to tell you, though, we've also added a percentage of completion in the progress dialog box for geoprocessing. So if you've got a tool that may take several minutes to run, doing a complicated overlay or some other functionality, you'll get a percentage of completion as part of the readout from the geoprocessing tool now. Here is a more detailed example of the error codes being hyperlinked back to the help doc. And again, what I want to iterate here is that you're getting some feedback as to why something did not work. So these error codes hyperlinked to the help topic give you both a description and a suggested solution to the problem. We'll see this in a demonstration in a couple of minutes as well. Now, something I'm very, very excited about with 9.3 is the introduction of what we call a resource center. With the ArcGIS 9.3 products release, which will be in early July, resource centers will be available for you to go to. Visit http://resources.esri.com to get to the resource centers. What the resource centers are is what I would term a one-stop location to get content to add to my maps, or perhaps new maps to use as a basis for other things, to get to developer help, to get to the support online rather than my ArcDoc, which was installed with the software, and to get to other support centers for other products. You'll notice that on the graphic I'm showing you here, we're seeing the different tabs within the ArcGIS Desktop Resource Center. Now, content is a really important part of the Resource Center, and you'll also notice that on the graphic I'm showing you that within ArcMap, we have access to that content from the Resource Center from the File menu. A little more about this later when we have a look at the demonstration. Now, some of that really nice content that's available from the Resource Center for you is pre-authored layers, maps, and globes. Notice here how I'm showing you that it's possible to go to the content for map and open an actual published map document. So you could use this map and its content as a basis and put some of your own local data on it, and then produce a really good cartographic result if need be. You can also add layers, and so this will be pre-authored layers of information. A little later, we'll see how we can take a digital elevation model layer and add it to our map to enhance the quality of what we're doing. Some of the content would be imagery, streets, shaded relief data, physical features. When the resource centers are up and running for you, I'd really urge you to go and have a look at these. There's a lot of really good, very powerful content that you can leverage and use in your day-to-day work. The resource centers also have content metadata and, of course, as I mentioned, the user guides, the user forums, and the online help. Now, earlier I spoke about crash detection and reporting, and I wanted to show you a little more of how crash detection is built into the software. In earlier versions of ArcGIS, if your software perhaps crashed as a result of for some reason or another, the reports that were generated were fairly cryptic, and you were requested to send the report to Microsoft. Well, with the crash detection that we've built into ArcGIS 9.3, you are now offered the option to send your crash report directly to ESRI. So essentially, you're sending information to us about what was in play or what had happened at the point when the crash occurred. Often crashes occur as a result of insufficient resources available, perhaps not enough memory on your machine at the point when the crash occurred, and it's useful for us to know what the reason was. So it's a way of returning automatic feedback to us and really does close the loop and helps us if you do send us these error reports. The error reports you can either save and send later, or you can set up to automatically email to us to assist us in figuring out what may have gone wrong and what the trends are for a specific level of crash perhaps. So let's move on a little and take a look at a software demonstration in which we're going to show you some of the resource centers. We're going to have a look at the ArcDoc Online, and we're going to have a look at some of the geoprocessing changes that have been done in ArcGIS. Now, here is a map that I've put together with some earthquake history information for Southern California. And you'll notice I have the state boundary and some urban areas. This map is rather bland, and it's not particularly exciting, but it would really be much more interesting if I had put some elevation data or some additional information in the background to make it all sort of stand out or pop out at me. Well, remember, the Resource Center offers me this opportunity, and I can get to resources, in fact, some of the content on the resources from my File menu and the Add Data from Resource choice or menu choice. Well, I'm not going to do that at this point because I want to show you the actual Resource Center. And here is the Resource Center itself. This is the ArcGIS Desktop Resource Center for the desktop products. And you'll notice that I can go to a Content tab, I can go to Web Help, I can go to For Developers. I'm going to go to the Content tab right away. And I'm going to need to just log in real quickly over here. And this should take a second. And we're in. And here we have the Content tab for maps and layers and globes and globe layers. Now notice that on the Map tab here, I can open up completely new created map documents that have been published with data in them. Now remember, I'm only interested in layers, and I wanted to add a layer to my ArcMap map to make those earthquake areas really stand out. So I'm going to use the Layers tab, and I'm going to choose Shaded Relief. Just before I do that, however, let me hover over the For Developers area so you can see that you can get to developer help from the Resource Center. You can also get to support, knowledge bases, and forums, and you can get to other resource centers as well. The idea here is it's a sort of one-stop locale for you to get to all the things that you previously would have had to go to the ESRI.com page, support.esri.com, and even to edn.esri.com to find. Now it's all in one location. It's a really nice way of just going to one spot and finding everything you might possibly need. Now let's go ahead and add this shaded relief to our map. And you'll notice that I'm given an open dialog to open the layer file and then launch that layer file to be added into my ArcMap environment. Now I'm going to minimize and notice how in ArcMap my content from the Resource Center has been added. Now I can see that on many of these earthquake locations are actually along the San Andreas Fault, which has a very strong north-south axis over here for us. So that's a little example of how I would get to some additional information from the resource center and add it into my map and make it a lot more efficient. Now, recall that I said we could add or create a model from just clicking on the model button, and my pointer is currently pointing at that model button. Now, if I were going to create a model and I didn't want to save the model, I'd use that button. Well, I've done a little work beforehand, and I've created a selection error model. And in this model, what I've done is I've pre-created a query, a selection, and the selection itself has a deliberate mistake in the expression. In this case, I've asked for magnitude earthquakes greater than 99 to be returned. Now, I know that this is going to return 0 as a result of the actual query. And the reason why I did this was to show you the error warning that was generated. In this case, warning 117 was generated, showing me that there was a problem with this geoprocessing tool that I just executed. Now, I could click on error 117 and go to the help doc, just to save a few seconds here and also to minimize the effect on bandwidth. I've already got the help doc open, and I'm going to show you what error 117 did. So here's what would have happened if I clicked on the hyperlink. It would have taken me right down to error 117, which in this case tells me, warning, an empty output was generated. So essentially, as a description of the error here, it's telling me that 0 rows were returned from the query or the selection that that particular tool had done. The solution here, that the warning was unexpected, perhaps the extent environment setting wasn't set, or perhaps the mistake was as a result of the incorrect value being given in the expression. Now, moving on a little further, we can also have a look at some of these additional things in the help doc that I spoke about. And let's take a look at the new graphics. Notice the graphics here for the clip tool are quite nice. They've added in all kinds of different references to what it is that's required. And if I scroll down a little further, you'll see some of these new graphic styles as well. Here we're showing you the clip tool and how in batch mode, each of these parameters in the clip tool actually become portions of the clip batch mode. Also notice the new sort of tear-off style that is there for graphics as well. Let's take a look at some of those expandables I spoke about. And here we're seeing a topic already expanded. If I click on the negative sign here, I can reduce that topic, and I can also click on the plus sign again, and I can open up a topic. So initially, you're not confronted with too much detail. With the expandables, you can choose how much detail you'd like to show when viewing the help. Well, that concludes our demonstration at this point, and what we're going to do next is we're going to take a few questions. Let's move over, and in quick summary, we spoke about documentation changes, geoprocessing highlights, geoprocessing enhancements, and the resource centers. Let's move over to Bruce. And Bruce, would you like to take some questions for us?
Certainly, Colin. We've got some good questions coming in this afternoon. Dan from Bozeman asks, is the model builder button available to all 3 licenses of ArcGIS Desktop? Yes, Dan, it is. Auld from Niigata in Japan asks, will it be possible to open a geodatabase created in 9.3 in 9.2? Well, provided you've installed 9.2 Service Pack 5 or 6, Auld, yes, that will be possible, but you must do that. Betty from Chicago asks, since you can save graphics as a feature class, can you also save text in a data frame to an annotation feature class? Yes, Betty, point, line, polygon, and text graphics can all be converted to a feature class. Todd from Long Beach asks, will the bookmarks functions within ArcMap carry over into ArcReader, and will there be a drop-down for bookmarks in ArcReader? Yes, Todd, the bookmarks from ArcMap will carry into ArcReader, and that's exactly what there'll be in Reader. Will be a bookmark drop-down. The Bookmark Manager dialog is not available in ArcReader because you cannot create bookmarks in ArcReader. Gina from Richmond asks, has the capability to force auto-label placement inside of a polygon been added in 9.3? Well, Gina, within the Maplix extension at ArcGIS 9.3, there are now 2 more concepts for polygon labeling, internal zones and external zones. The user may specify where a label appears within a polygon within 9 different zones, rank that the preferences, and block zones from being labeled. The same is true with external zones, so 2 new concepts for you for polygon label placement. Trevor from Lansing asks, what version of Python will be distributed with 9.3 And does ESRI support or recommend a specific Python IDE? Well, Trevor, Python 2.5.1 is installed with ArcGIS 9.3, and NumPy 103 is also installed, and the idle IDE environment is installed by default. However, with 9.3, the Python Win IDE is also supplied on your product media, and you can install that if you have a preference. Now, that's all that we have time for at the moment. We'll cross back to Colin.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Let's move on to our second topic, ArcMap productivity enhancements. So in ArcMap, many new and improved things have been added and changes have been made. Some of the highlights which we picked out, oh, and by the way, the PDF document with What's New 9.3 is available for you to download and have a look at on the What's New 9.3 webpage on ESRI.com. And so if you're ready to go and find out more, do go and visit the What's New 9.3 webpage on ESRI.com and download the PDF document, and you'll get to see a lot of these things I'm talking about. So some of the things that are quite exciting for me is enhancements to graphics and the conversion of graphic features. Something that allows us to use graphics to clip rasters is also very exciting. Changes to bookmarks and layers and legends, some updates to working with tables, the ability also for you to input relative format for scales, the options for you to pause labeling, to interpolate z-values while editing, and something I'm really excited about, something we call HTML pop-ups, is also something exciting and new. And I'm going to cover a few of these. I may not have time to cover all of these with you in the next couple of minutes. Now, one of the first viewer enhancements that many people have requested is the option to create multiple viewer windows for multiple data frames. Now, this functionality has been in ArcGIS 9.2 through Service Pack 2, but not too many people have really been aware of that, so I wanted to point it out as part of the What's New 9.3 for you. The idea with multiple viewers is that you may want to edit in one data frame, but keep multiple viewers open for other data frames and kind of edit the one in context with all the others. And so the option for multiple viewer windows is really nice and very exciting to have. To create these multiple viewer windows, by the way, we have a new button on the Tools toolbar, which you'll see highlighted with a tiny little red square down the bottom over here because our graphics are a little small, but that's the multiple viewer window. Now let's move on and have to bookmarks. Prior to 9.3, dealing and managing with bookmarks was found in the View menu, and you had a bookmarks menu choice. Well, with 9.3, we've added bookmarks to the full menu interface for ArcMap. And so by clicking on the bookmarks menu choice now, you have the option of sorting and reordering and creating bookmarks, but also you have the option of launching up Bookmark Manager. And the big Bookmark Manager kind of hovers around and stays there, and you can use it to zoom to a bookmark or pan to a bookmark or even create them, remove them, load, and save them. Oh, and by the way, you can copy bookmarks between data frames, and since you can load and save them, you can actually use them in other applications if you wish to as well. So you can use them in ArcScene or ArcGlobe if you wanted to, the same bookmarks you've created in ArcMap. Now let's take a look at some of this HTML pop-up stuff that I was talking about. Now, HTML pop-ups are the ability for us to define a layer property. So it's a property of a layer in the table of contents. And by using the HTML pop-up button, we can have the features in the layer actually pop up or display some content in an HTML window. Now, what's interesting is that this HTML content could be all the attribute fields that are visible for the features, or it could be pointing to a URL, some kind of web address with web content, for example. If you decide to use content from the attributes to display in the HTML pop-up, you can define with formatting, HTML formatting, how this content should look. You can also incorporate links and multimedia, and you can use the XSL styles if you want to further control and to format the content that the HTML pop-up will bring up. Now, keep in mind, this HTML pop-up is really nice because a little later we're going to talk about KML technologies, and we'll be able to use and leverage HTML pop-ups when creating the KML files that are now part of the new functionality in 9.3. Now for ArcMap joins and relates, many of you will be most excited to hear that we've added a join and relates tab to the layer properties. In the past, you would have to have right-clicked on the layer inside of the table of contents to create join or relate. Well, with 9.3, you now have that join and relate tab, which allows you to view the properties of your joins and relates, and actually to add and remove relates if need be. Look at the graphic I'm showing you here, and you'll see that I can see the content of a join and the content of a relate. So I can see which feature classes and tables and which key fields are active and being used in the joins and relates that I have used. For joins, by the way, we've also now made the join respect definition queries. What that means is that if you had pre-selected some features and then did a join, the join will only work with those selected features, not with all the original features in the feature class that you may have worked with. Joins also honor field aliasing, so you can see the alias names when doing a join, not the original name of the feature if you don't choose to. You can also use the content of a join for symbology, which is very useful now. For attributes, the folks that work with our tables and attributes in the ArcGIS team have done some work on sorting, and many of you have requested the ability to sort a table by multiple fields. We've added this functionality in for you, and the graphic you see on the slide is actually illustrating sorting by 4 separate fields. You can also toggle the aliases and real names of your tables now. It's very simple, just a toggle, click and so to see the field, the real name and the alias names. Oh, and we've also done some changes to the calculate geometry dialog. So if you added an extra field and you wanted to, say, compute the area of a polygon, or you wanted to get the beginning coordinate of a line or the midpoint of a line, those are all things that the calc geometry dialog box would give you. Again, I do want to urge that you take a look at the What's New 9.3 PDF document and get some more information about these. Now, moving along, earlier in the previous demonstration, you saw me show you a resource page and some of the content of the resource page, and I added content from a layer file to my map. Now, what facilitated that ability was that new to 9.3, we now have our layer files registered in Windows. So if you're viewing your content of a workspace or folder using Windows Explorer, and you find a layer file or you've created layer files, a double click on the layer file will actually open up ArcMap and add the content of the layer file into your ArcMap. Similarly, you can email these layer files to people, and you can even incorporate them on web pages as we have on the resource page. And so by clicking on the layer file in the web page, if I did not have ArcMap open, it would have opened ArcMap and added that layer in. In my case, I had ArcMap open, and so it added the layer to my current ArcMap session that I was working on. This is very interesting and very exciting news, actually, is the ability for layer files to be registered in Windows. Now, let's take a look at some of the graphics and graphic functionality that has changed. Export raster data to graph using graphic is new. Many of you have requested this. In the past, you had clipped or exported your raster data. The only options you had were to export using the current data frame extent, which was rectangular, or to use the original dataset extent, again, which was rectangular. A lot of people asked for the ability to clip the raster to the extent of a graphic or a shape of some sort. And in the case of 9.3, we've now added this option, part of the export raster data dialog. You'll see a little checkbox, and I've actually highlighted that here for you, where you say click and use the selected graphics to clip with. Now, further improvements to dealing and working with graphics in 9.3 is the option for us within the ArcMap application to convert graphics to feature. This is on the drawing toolbar, in fact. It's on the drawing menu. You have the convert graphics to feature option. Now, you might say to yourself, well, why do I want to convert a graphic to a feature? In other words, why do I want to create a feature with feature classes derived from a graphic or a shapefile? Now, in a lot of circumstances, people use graphics to redline areas of interest, or they may doodle and create a basic outline or structure for a new building or a subdivision, just interactively using the graphic drawing tools without really starting an edit session. And later they realize that they may need to keep this plan or this red line. And so the option to convert the graphic to a feature from within ArcMap makes it very useful to do that. Converting to shapefile or feature class is very simple, and either point, line, polygon, text, or 3D graphics can be converted. Now, since we've done some improvements to conversion of graphic as a new option, we've also added some new things that people have requested for the graphics. Many of you have requested the ability to, for a point feature, find the XY location of a point graphic, or to be able to find the Z value of the point that I've just created. Or for polygons, polygon graphics, when I draw them on screen to redline an area, for example, I want to get the area of the area size, or the perimeter, or the centroid of that graphic. And so we've added a new tab to the properties of the graphics called an area tab. And that area tab will give you the readout of areas, perimeters, lengths, beginning coordinates, and so on as you choose. Notice that I'm also showing you in the graphic that you can get these readouts of area and perimeter and length in different units. So you can choose which unit it is you'd like that value to be returned. Before I do forget, the size and position tab also have the option for you to save or to name your graphics. So if you've created 20 smaller little graphic polygons, you could name each one independently. And when converting the graphic to a feature in a feature class or shapefile, those names are carried across as attributes of the graphic, or of the feature derived from the graphic. Before I forget, find and identify tools. If you use those to create any graphics or find an address, the address becomes the name of the graphic, as does the first string attribute of the graphic that you have located. Now, some enhancements for ArcMap editing that are very exciting for us is some better feedback from the editing tools. While sketching features, as you're sketching, in the lower end of the ArcMap application, you'll get a running commentary, if you like, of the length, direction you're sketching in, the perimeter of any polygon that you had finished the sketch of, or the area of a polygon that you might have sketched. Again, these are just readouts that give you some feedback. And, if you wanted to create a new line feature with the sketch tools and you didn't want to right-click and go to the sketch constraints and type in direction for the next segment to be created, you could use this direction feedback in the bottom of the application as a mechanism to assist you. Some usability improvements in the editing environment is the ability for us to get some feedback, some visual feedback. And you'll see I'm moving my cursor towards some visual feedback that the split tool will give us before committing an actual split. Likewise, for the fillet tool, before committing to the fillet of a curve here, we can see with visual feedback what the potential result of that fillet will be. We've also added shortcuts for topology, shortcuts to pan to a location and to identify. And when using the arc and tangent tools, we've added some functionality where you can hold your keyboard R down and then type in the radius for the arc or the tangent. In the past, you didn't have these mechanisms. You had to kind of manually put in or figure out what the radius would be that you wanted to do. We've also improved in the editing environment support for entering units other than map units. So when using sketch constraints, for example, the absolute XY sketch constraint, so you're saying, I want to create the next vertex or point at this following absolute XY. Well, in the past, that had to be in map units. Now you can specify these values in decimal degrees or degrees, minutes, seconds, as long as you put the correct acronym at the end of the values you're putting in. So DMS and DD for degrees, decimal degrees, and DMS for degrees, minutes, seconds. Again, do take a look at the What's New doc to get a better idea of some of these units. Now, mapping and ArcMap printing and exporting has also undergone some significant changes. There have been some updates to the ArcPress software and a new temporary metafile size limit setting. In the past, when printing really large maps, if you had a fairly small metafile set, you could have received an error saying, I cannot map the metafile into memory. And this error was rather frustrating for people in the past. Well, now with the ArcMap Advanced Settings Utility, you can go and increase the metafile temporary size limit. And so you could alleviate the problem of metafile with not enough memory. We've also added support for some of the new large format plotters and printers. Specifically, there is support for Epson Stylus Pro, for HP DesignJet, and for the OSE Graphics large format 64-inch printers. Now, an area that I'm finding very useful for me when creating maps and wanting to share these maps with others is some improved support for exporting my map layout to PDFs. Now, remember, this has been around for a while, but with 9.3, we've improved how layers are nested in the PDF environment. In other words, how the table of content with its data frames and layers within data frames are preserved in the PDF. Some new functionality that's also available is the option for feature attributes that are exported as PDF object data. Essentially, what this means is that within the PDF environment, you'd be able to do a quick query and find out what the attributes are of a feature on your map layout that you'd export to PDF. Now, within the PDF document, which you're looking at here in ArcReader, the data frames and group layers in our hierarchy from the table of contents in ArcMap have been preserved. And you'll also notice the little eye icon here allows you to turn on and turn off layers in the PDF document in ArcReader. I'm going to show you a little of this coming up in the demonstrations in a few minutes. Now, one more thing to keep in mind about PDF is that some additional geospatial content can also be passed across with your PDF document. With 9.3 and a patch that'll be downloadable at the release of 9.3, you also have the option to export georeferencing information. And what this implies is that within Adobe Reader 9, by the way, which will be the latest version that'll be available then, you can display coordinate readouts from your map layouts you've exported, and you can also find locations based on XY coordinates. If you have Adobe Pro, you will be able to enable the facility to also measure distances on the map within the Adobe Reader product. Now, the way to get to this additional geospatial content and to have it available in the PDF will be an additional checkbox on the PDF export dialog, which we'll look at in a few minutes. And this checkbox will only be available if you install the ArcGIS 9.3 patch for PDF. Now, a little time for us to take a look at the demonstration. So let's move over to Demo 2, and the first thing I want to show you in my second demonstration is some of that functionality about multiple viewers. So you'll notice I have 3 different data frames active. I'm going to go to this third data frame by holding my Alt key down and clicking on the data frame. So you'll see the content of this data frame. I'm showing you a proposed redevelopment of an open piece of land. Now I want to create a viewer window, so I'm going to use the viewer button from my tools toolbar, and I'm going to create a viewer window of the proposed redevelopment. I'm going to move this across to one area. Now I'm going to activate my second data frame, which is a CAD drawing overlaying an image, and I'm going to create a second data frame of an additional area of interest that I might be looking at. Let's look at our third data frame, and this is the area that we'd like to work with. And in fact, let's create a new viewer window of this data frame area where our proposed redevelopment should go. So what you're seeing here is 3 different viewer windows, each derived from a completely different data frame with different content. And as I work within the downtown data frame, so I'll be able to see changes in the viewer window for this in context with the viewer windows of the additional frames that I've created viewer windows for. Let's close these off since our bandwidth is a little limited and I don't want to overwhelm you with too much stuff on screen. And let's take a look at some of that other additional functionality. Remember I spoke about HTML pop-ups and bookmarks? Just before I go ahead, here is the bookmark option, and notice that I have a bookmark manager in which I can manage my bookmarks if need be fairly simply and very easily. I can zoom to a bookmark, I can create bookmarks and other things very easily with the bookmark manager. Let's minimize this and let's return back to our previous extent. Now, HTML pop-ups. Remember I told you about those. I'm quite excited about them. Let me go ahead and let me take a look at the properties of the simple buildings layer. And when I open up the properties, a new tab added is this HTML pop-up tab. Remember I also said a new joins and relates tab was added? I have no joins and relates just yet, but if I did, I could manage them from here. I could add and create them from here as well. Let's look at this HTML pop-up. Now, currently, the HTML pop-up is enabled, and I can enable it to show content from all visible fields of the table by checking that button, or I can have HTML pop-up show me the content of a URL. Now, I've already set this URL up, and in fact, I'm particularly interested in building codes from the Wikipedia site. So let's only use the HTML pop to view some content from the Wikipedia page. So here's the HTML pop-up button on our tools toolbar. This is a new button that's added there. And I can go ahead and I'm going to click on perhaps this building here, and HTML pop-up is going to launch my Wikipedia page all about building codes. So see how nice that HTML pop-up is? And so I can get content derived from a URL, or I could get content for this HTML pop-up derived from the attributes of my feature. Now let's move on a little. And remember I spoke about the ability for me to enhance and work with graphics in a more enhanced way. Let's go and create a graphic for a proposed design, my red line area in this new property area here. So I'm going to use the graphic tools and I'm going to create a new building. I'm just going to create the red line structure for potentially a new building. So let's go up and let's complete our new building. So here's a new graphic. Remember, I can right-click on the graphic and go to its properties. And now let's change the color of the graphic just to make it a little clearer that we're working with a graphic. Choose the Apply button. Now, what if I wanted to name the graphic? Well, let's go to the Size and Position tab, and I'm going to call this New Building. So I've applied the name to the graphic, and if I export the graphic out to feature class or shapefile, that attribute goes across as an attribute of the feature. Now, what if I'd like the area of the new building? So I can get the area in square meters, its perimeter, and its center or centroid. Also, remember, I can get this in acres, in hectares, square meters, miles, feet, any unit I choose to from the drop-down list. Now, let's take a look at how I convert this graphic. So I'm going to convert the graphic by going to the drawing menu and see we've added a convert graphics to feature menu choice. I'm not actually going to do the conversion, but I will show you the dialog, and it says, what do you want to convert? The graphic. Which coordinate system would you like to apply to the feature created from the graphic? A layers coordinate system or the data frame coordinate system? Or that of the feature data set to which you're exporting if it is in a geodatabase? And then lastly, specify the shapefile or the feature class. Now keep in mind, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to delete the graphic because I want to show you a little more functionality. Now to save a little time, I've gone ahead and created a map layout. And this map layout has 3 different data frames displayed, and it's a very basic map of a possible city redevelopment scenario. Now why not export this to PDF to share with some of my other users in my department? So I'm going to go to the File menu, and I'm going to use the Export Data option or XMap option here to export my map. And fairly large dialog pops up. Let me close the size down a little for you, and let's take a look at that dialog. So it says, give me a name for the PDF. Sure. In fact, I've already chosen PDF, right? So I'm going to give it the name for the PDF. And it says, would you like to specify some information about the output resolution? I'm going to leave the default. The next tab is specify some parameters for color and other characteristics of the PDF. Again, I'm going to leave the defaults. But from the Advanced tab, I'm offered the choice of exporting with no layer information and attribute information, exporting with layer information, in other words, the table of content information, and exporting with layers and feature attributes as well. I'm going to pick that choice, and when I'm ready, I'm going to choose the Save button. Now, to save a little time again, I've already done this process. Again, it is fairly quick to do, but just to save some time, I'm going to take us directly to Adobe Reader, and here's my map. Now, you will believe me, this is the entire map, but I've zoomed to a small area. Again, bandwidth is a little problem for us here. And what I've also done is I've displayed the layers. So you'll see downtown, which was one of my data frames, is reserved here. Notice all the layer information is there. I've also got proposed redevelopment, another data frame. And I've turned off the simple parcels to show you that within the Adobe Reader, you have the option of turning on and turning off individual layers of the map that you'd exported to PDF. What I also have is the option to use in the Adobe Reader the Object Data tool. Now that Object Data tool, if I click on it, will allow me to get to the attributes of a feature. Let me click on some of these and I'll show you very clearly how it's possible for me to see the individual attributes of features that I'm working with. Now, that concludes this short demonstration. In the last topic, we spoke about viewer enhancements, bookmarks, HTML pop-ups, joins and relates, layer files, graphics, editing changes, and a bit of printing and exporting. We're going to switch over to Bruce to take a couple of questions for us now. Off you go, Bruce.
Thank you, Colin. Lenka from Brno in the Czech Republic asks, how many fields or can I sort using the advanced table sorting? Can it be 100 fields? Well, Lenka, you can sort up to 4 fields in advanced sorting. If you wanted to tackle more, we'd recommend you do it through DBMS View in your underlying database. Brian from Scottsdale asks, when a table is sorted, is that sorted table saved? Brian, no, it's not. The sorting in the table dialog is only for your session. Jeff from Alliance asks, will the export to KML tool in 9.3 be available in ArcCatalog and ArcMap? Yes, it is, Jeff. In fact, there are 2 new geoprocessing tools, one for exporting layer files and one for exporting MXDs. They're both in both environments. Liz in Brisbane asks, is there any change in the Python syntax to create the geoprocessor from 9.2 to 9.3? Yes, Liz, there is. If you use the ArcGIS scripting.create method and in parentheses put the 9.3 as an argument, then your geoprocessor will be instantiated with some new capabilities. Among them is to return native Python structures such as lists and booleans. Ken from Kamloops asks, are hyperlinks going to be exported along with object data when you export a map to a PDF? I'm going to combine my answer to Ken's question with another question that came up frequently in our earlier presentations today. Are HTML pop-ups available in the new georeference PDF when opened by ArcReader 9? In both these situations, the functionality is under control of Adobe because they write to how Reader behaves. And in both cases, unfortunately, those experiences are not going to happen at the current release of Reader 9 or the forthcoming release of Reader 9. But given the amount of demand that we're hearing in these seminars for this functionality, we'll take the request through to Adobe. Wayne from Bothell asks, are you able to rename a bookmark? Yes, Wayne, you are. In the Bookmark Manager dialog, you can simply right-click on the name of a bookmark and give it a new name. Wayne also asks, is it possible to delete more than one field in a table at one time? Yes, Wayne, if you use the Delete Field Geoprocessing tool, simply right-click on it and use Batch mode. Not only for this geoprocessing tool itself, but for any GP tool, you can right-click, operate it in batch, and perform multiple operations. Trung from Norman asks, can we use ESRI Resource Center now because it asks me to enter the passcode? Well, Trung, the ESRI Resource Centers will be free to air on July 1st. At present, it's just people who've been in the 9.3 beta program and the early adopter program who have access to the resource centers. John from Rancho Palos Verdes asks, will users be able to upload content to the resource centers? Well, no, John, although if you do have some content you think will be valuable to users, we would like to hear from you. But another idea might be to create your own resource center. They're simply websites with layer and MXD files on them. You can put your data for your organization, and you can put ours there too, or links to it. Kim from Baltimore asks, is the resource center replacing the ArcGIS online area? Will the links I currently have in my documents still work? Well, Kim, yes, your links will work. The Resource Center is not replacing the ArcGIS Online. In fact, the content of the Resource Center is simply the free content from ArcGIS Line, so your links will continue to work. Robert from New Mexico asks, can you convert WMS or WFS or both to a feature class? Well, Robert, at 9.3, there's now a geoprocessing tool to export WFS to a feature class. This is available without installing any extension like Data Interop, but it is only available from the Arc Editor license break and up. Now we're out of time for those questions. I'll pass back to Colin.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Let's take a look at our last topic this afternoon, everyone. And the last topic we're going to be discussing web data in your maps. This is the part where we talk about some of the cool new things you can add into ArcMap from different resources and locations. So you've already noticed and seen how I used data from the ArcGIS Desktop Resource Center, and I used the Content tab to add layer data from the content from the Resource Center. Now, additional places you can get data and bring it in would be from an ArcGIS server image service, which you can access in our catalog. You can also bring data in from the OGC WMS services that can be browsed in the content tree in our catalog. So if you know the URL, go to our catalog in 9.3, double-click on the OGC WMS service, enter the URL, and you have another data source which you can add and use in ArcMap if need be. Remember, the WMS sources are feature sources, so this is vector data that's being served through the OGC standard. OGC WCS data sources, these are coverage data sources or raster data, can also be browsed in the content tree in our catalog and could be another alternative data source that you could add into ArcMap and use. With ArcEditor, you have the ability to convert WFS to feature class. So the WFS source of data can become a new geodatabase feature class with an ArcEditor or above license. Now, I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about KML and publishing data to KML. A lot of people have heard of KML, and a lot of people have requested the ability to take their map content, their MXD documents, and layers, perhaps layer files, and to create KML files from them, which they could then open and use in other applications and clients. So with 9.3 at all license levels, you have access to the 2KML toolset in the conversion toolbox of geoprocessing tools, and you have the two tools, layer to KML and map to KML, available. By the way, you could also export directly to KML when using geoprocessing tools, querying, and also geocoding results can go directly to KML as well. One of the things I alluded to a little earlier when I spoke about HTML pop-ups, and I told you I was really excited about them, is that layers, both in the map or separate layer files that are exported to KML with HTML pop-ups enabled, actually carry the HTML pop-up functionality across within the KML file as well. So within the client that you're using the KML file, you can click on an identifier of a feature with HTML pop-up, and whatever content you had in the HTML pop-up will appear within that application. Some of the clients that are included that can use KML are ArcGlobe, ArcGIS Explorer, Google Earth, Google Maps, and Microsoft Virtual Earth. So let's take a real quick look at some of the functionality of KML by looking at our final demonstration. Now, in this final demonstration, you'll see I've opened up a map document. Again, I have my earthquake data here. I have my state boundary and shaded relief information. And what I want to do is I want to convert one of the layers, this earthquake history layer, to a KML file. And similarly, I want to take a map document of the same content and convert to KML. Before I do continue, however, I'd like you to notice that for these earthquake magnitude symbols here, I've used a transparency option. And that same transparency option appears both in the table of content, and if you were creating a map and a legend, the transparency would now in 9.3 be available in the legend as well. This is another strongly requested requirement that many people have asked for, and that I'm really excited is there. Now, let's take a look at Convert to KML. And to save a little time, I have created a model in which I have already added the layer file and map document and the layer to KML and map to KML functionality. Now, just to save a few more minutes, what I'm going to do is show you a little bit more about the map to KML tool. Now, in this tool, I specified the map document I wanted to convert. I also specified in the tool the data frame I wanted to convert. I could choose which one. Then I specified my output KMZ file to create. Now, there are two requirements that you really need to do in both the layer to KML and map to KML. One is to set the output scale that you'd like the KML file to have, and the other is to set the extent that the KML file covers. So you do need to set the output scale and extent for your data. I know it says optional for extent, but it does help if you do set that. Now, A few more things that are available, and again, these are optional, is to further control the data content of the KML file by returning a single composite image and converting vector to raster from the source. Single composite image will take all the layers in your map document and kind of collapse them into one image and then export that to KML for you. You also have, under Output Image Properties, the ability to set the pixel size of the returned image and the DPI of the output image. These, by the way, are KML standards that we're adhering to. Now, when I'm done, and the same functionality is there for the layer to KML, I would use the Run button to execute this little model, and it really is rather quick. Now, I just wanted to point out that a little earlier, I did go ahead in the layer file for earthquake, and I did go ahead and set an HTML pop-up to show all the visible fields. So I want to show you how this works inside of ArcGIS Explorer. So KML files are created. Let's open up ArcGIS Explorer. And here we have ArcGIS Explorer, and I've added the two KML files in for us to save a few minutes. What I've done is I went to File Open. I chose down below the KML option for Look in KML, specified the two KML files, and then choose the Open button. So my KML files are now active, and I'm going to use an identify task on one of the earthquakes that I have. And take a look what happens. So I specify on the earthquake itself. Notice how the identify tool has returned for me the HTML pop-up content, which in this case was all of the fields that were visible for the earthquake features that I originally had exported across to the KML file. So that really concludes a little of our demonstration. In this last topic, we spoke about web-based services, publishing maps and layers to KML. Let's move over to Bruce. And Bruce, I think we have time for about 3 or 4 questions before we need to complete.
Okay, thank you. Stan from Linden asks, do you have to have ArcGIS 9.3 to have access to the Resource Center? No, you don't, Stan. All you're going to need to have is an ESRI global account, and the Resource Centers will be free to you from about July the 1st. Xenotool from Klong Lang asks, in the new HTML pop-up, can I select a few field attributes to show in the pop-up rather than all the fields? Yes, you can, Xenotool. To do this, you'd simply control the visibility of the fields in the Layer Properties dialog, and only the fields which are visible will be exported in the HTML pop-ups. Jeff from Everett asks, to take advantage of the new PDF output capabilities, do you have to upgrade to Adobe Reader 9X? Well, for the layer table of contents structure honoring and the object data export, no, Adobe Reader 8X is all that's required. But for the georeferenced features that you just heard Colin talk about, yes, you will need Adobe Reader 9 when it's made available by Adobe. That's my 3 questions. Thank you, Colin. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Hey, everybody. For more information, I do want to point you to the www.esri.com page. I do want you to go and have a look at the What's New ArcGIS 9.3 webpage. And as of today, we do have that PDF downloadable for you with all the What's New concepts and topics. So again, before we go, I'd like you to point you to the resources that I just spoke about on the webpage. Your comments do help us improve our seminars. Please do take a moment to complete our survey. Just click that Give Us a Feedback link to take our survey. We do hope you enjoyed today's seminar, and on behalf of ESRI, I'd like to thank you all for attending.